Jiwoo sat on the stone steps outside her new quarters, holding her combat helmet in her lap. The afternoon sun of Velkaris felt different from Earth's sun. It had a softer quality, almost like it was filtered through honey. She didn't mind it. After 3 months of space travel, any natural light felt like a blessing. She opened her paint kit carefully. Inside were small bottles of acrylic paint in every color she could imagine. Blues, reds, yellows, greens, purples, and everything in between. She had brought them from Earth specifically for this purpose. Wherever she went, whatever mission took her across the galaxy, she always painted her helmet. It was her ritual, her way of making the unfamiliar feel like home. The embassy compound around her was quiet. Most of the other humans were inside, unpacking or attending briefings about the Velen people. Jiwoo had already attended the morning session. She learned that the Velen were a feline species, standing about as tall as humans but covered in short fur that came in patterns of stripes and spots. They had large eyes that could see in almost complete darkness, and their ears could rotate independently to catch sounds from all directions. The briefing officer had stressed one point repeatedly: be respectful, be patient, and don't make sudden movements. The Velen were cautious about humans. This was first contact between their species, and everyone was walking on eggshells. Jiwoo understood the caution, but she also believed that fear couldn't last forever. Eventually, people had to just be people, regardless of what they looked like. She dipped her brush into the blue paint and began working on the helmet's left side. She painted a simple flower first, the kind that grew in her grandmother's garden back in Seoul. The petals took shape slowly under her careful strokes. Blue for the petals, yellow for the center. She hummed while she worked, an old song her mother used to sing when Jiwoo was small. Behind a stack of supply crates about 20 meters away, 3 small shapes watched her with intense curiosity. Tavi was the oldest of the 3 cubs, though oldest only meant she had been born 2 months before her brothers. She had golden fur with black rosette patterns, and her eyes were enormous even by Velen standards. She had convinced Nix and Ren to follow her past the compound guards by promising them an adventure. "What is it doing?" Nix whispered. His fur was gray with darker stripes, and his tail twitched constantly when he was nervous. Right now it was twitching very fast. "Painting," Tavi said. She had heard the word from her father, who worked as a liaison with the humans. The humans make colored images on things, but why? Ren asked. He was the smallest, with cream-colored fur and brown spots. "Does it serve a purpose?" Tavi didn't know. That's why she wanted to watch. She had seen the humans from a distance before, but never this close. Never doing something so strange and fascinating. Jiwoo had moved on to painting mountains on the helmet's crown. She used gray and white paint, creating peaks that looked like the mountains near her childhood home. She smiled as she worked, lost in memories. The paint smelled sharp and chemical, but she loved that smell. It meant creation, transformation, making something plain into something personal. The 3 cubs crept closer, moving from behind the crates to behind a water storage unit. Now they were only 10 meters away. They could smell the paint clearly now. It made their noses twitch. "It's making pictures," Tavi breathed. "Look, those are mountains. And those are flowers." "Why on the helmet?" Nix asked. "Helmets are for protection. Pictures don't protect you." "Maybe human helmets work differently," Ren suggested. They watched as Jiwoo added tiny details to her painting. A bird flying near the mountains. Small grass blades at the bottom. She was completely absorbed in her work, her tongue sticking out slightly in concentration. She had taken off her uniform jacket, leaving just her gray undershirt, and paint had already smudged on her forearms. She set the helmet down carefully on a clean cloth and stood up, stretching her back. Her communicator was beeping. She walked a few steps away to answer it, speaking in low tones to whoever was on the other end. The 3 cubs looked at each other. This was their chance. "We should go back," Nick said, his tail twitching faster. "If we're caught, just a closer look," Tavi interrupted. "We'll be quick." She moved forward on silent pause, the way her mother had taught her when stalking practice targets. Nix and Ren followed, though Nix made small worried noises in his throat. They reached the steps where Jiwoo had been sitting. The helmet lay there, its painted surface still wet in places, gleaming in the honey-colored sunlight. Up close, it was even more beautiful than from a distance. The colors were so bright, so vivid. The Velen had art too, but it was usually made with natural dyes and earth tones. They had never seen colors like this, so pure and intense. Tavi reached out one paw tentatively, not quite touching the helmet. She could feel heat radiating from where the sun warmed the metal. Beside the helmet, the paint bottles sat open, each one a different color, each one like a little pool of liquid rainbow. "It's beautiful," Ren whispered. Tavi's paw hovered over a bottle of blue paint, the same blue as the flower petals. Before she really thought about what she was doing, she dipped the pad of her paw into the paint. It felt cool and wet and strange. She lifted her paw and looked at it. The blue paint covered her paw pad completely. Then, moving on pure impulse, on the kind of instinct that only children have, she pressed her painted paw against the side of the helmet. When she lifted her paw away, a perfect print remained. 4 toe pads and 1 larger palm pad, all in bright blue. Nix's eyes went huge. "Tavi, what did you—" But Ren was already dipping his paw in yellow paint. "If we're in trouble anyway, we might as well make it worth it," he said, and added his print next to Tavi's. Nix hesitated for only a second before joining them, choosing green paint. Soon all 3 cubs were adding prints to the helmet, giggling quietly, their earlier fear forgotten in the joy of creation. Blue prints, yellow prints, green prints, purple prints. They covered the helmet's surface, sometimes overlapping Jiwoo's careful paintings, sometimes finding empty spaces between the flowers and mountains. Jiwoo's voice came from behind them. "I'll report to the commander in 10 minutes. "Yes, I understand." The cubs froze. Slowly, in perfect synchronization, they turned to look at the human who was walking back toward them. Jiwoo stopped mid-step when she saw them. Her eyes went from the cubs to their paint-covered paws to her helmet, now decorated with dozens of small paw prints in various colors. For a long moment, nobody moved. Nobody breathed. The cubs huddled together, their ears flat against their heads, their tails tucked. Tavi stepped forward slightly, placing herself between her brothers and the human. If someone was going to be punished, she decided it should be her. She had started it. Jiwoo looked at her helmet. Months of careful work altered in minutes. Her peaceful mountains now had paw prints walking across them. Her flowers had paw prints as petals. The whole carefully planned design was interrupted by the chaotic marks of 3 playful children. She looked at the cubs, who were trembling slightly. Then Jiwoo smiled. The smile on Jiwoo's face was soft and genuine, not angry at all. The 3 cubs stared at her, confusion replacing their fear. In their experience, when younglings ruined an adult's work, anger always followed. Scolding, punishment, sometimes even a swat with a tail. But this human just smiled. Jiwoo walked slowly toward them, keeping her movements smooth and predictable. She remembered the briefing about not startling the Veln. She knelt down on the stone steps, bringing herself closer to their height. The cubs pressed together more tightly, but they didn't run. Up close, Jiwoo could see how young they really were. Their paws were still disproportionately large compared to their bodies, the way kitten paws always were. Their eyes were wide with wonder and worry. Paint covered their paws and had even splattered on their chest fur. The smallest one, the cream-colored cub, had a smudge of yellow paint on his nose. Jiwoo reached toward her helmet, and all 3 cubs flinched. But she didn't pick it up. Instead, she pressed her palm flat into the red paint, coating her entire hand. Then, deliberately, carefully, she pressed her hand against the helmet right next to one of Tavi's blue paw prints. When she pulled her hand away, a perfect red handprint remained on the metal surface. She looked at the cubs and gestured to the paint, then to the helmet, then made a welcoming motion with her painted hand. Tavi's ears perked up first. "It wants us to continue?" she whispered to her brothers in the Veln language. "I think so," Ren whispered back. Nix was already moving toward the paint bottles, his natural caution overcome by excitement. He chose purple this time, a deep violet that reminded him of the night flowers that bloomed near his home. He added 2 more prints to the helmet, then looked at Jiwoo for approval. She nodded enthusiastically and gave him a thumbs up, which the cub didn't understand but interpreted correctly as positive. Soon all 3 cubs were adding prints again, but this time without fear, without hesitation. They experimented with colors, sometimes mixing them accidentally when they didn't clean their paws between dips. They created patterns, little trails of prints that marched around the helmet like tiny parades. Jiwoo added her own prints occasionally, her much larger hands creating striking contrasts with the small paw marks. She laughed when Ren accidentally got paint on his tail, and then left a long purple streak across the helmet's back. She showed them how to blend colors, dipping into 2 different paints and creating new shades. The cubs made small chirping sounds, their version of laughter. The sounds were high-pitched and musical, and Jiwoo found herself laughing along with them even though she didn't know what was funny. Joy, apparently, needed no translation. Tavi dipped both front paws in orange paint and walked them across the helmet's surface like a tiny dance. Nyx made a pattern that looked almost like a flower, using dots of pink paint arranged in a circle. Ren created chaos, splattering multiple colors in an abstract explosion that somehow worked perfectly with the rest of the design. They were so absorbed in their work that none of them noticed the approaching footsteps until a voice called out sharply in the Veln language, "Tavi, Nyx, Ren, step away from the human immediately." The cubs jumped, spinning around. Several adult Veln were approaching quickly, their body language tense and alert. Leading them was an older Veln with silver fur marked with age. His eyes were sharp and worried. Jiwoo stood up slowly, keeping her paint-covered hands visible and non-threatening. She had no idea what was being said, but she could read the situation clearly enough. These were the cubs' parents or guardians, and they thought their children were in danger. Hwan-Ki, the lead diplomatic liaison, reached them first. He positioned himself between the cubs and Jiwoo, his tail lashing. "Children, are you hurt? Did the human harm you?" "No, father," Tavi said quickly. "We were just painting. Look." She held up her paint-covered paws proudly. Hwan-Ki's eyes moved from his daughter to Jiwoo, then to the helmet on the steps. He saw the chaotic mix of paw prints and handprints, the blending of human and Veln marks in a colorful mess that was somehow beautiful. 2 other adult Veln, whom Jiwoo guessed were the parents of the other cubs, arrived. They immediately began fussing over Nyx and Ren, checking them for injuries, sniffing them to make sure they were all right. "We are deeply sorry," Hwan-Ki said to Jiwoo in careful English. "Our children should not have disturbed you. We will compensate you for the damage to your equipment. Please accept our—" Jiwoo held up her hand, stopping him. She picked up her helmet and held it up to the light, turning it slowly so everyone could see it from all angles. The paw prints and handprints covered almost every surface now, creating a wild tapestry of colors and shapes. Her original paintings of flowers and mountains were still visible underneath, but they were now part of something larger, something collaborative. "It's not damaged," Jiwoo said. She spoke slowly, knowing that Hwan-Ki's English was still developing. "It's better. Much better." She pointed to a section where her red handprint overlapped with Tavi's blue paw print, creating purple where they mixed. "This is beautiful. They made it beautiful." Hwan-Ki stared at her, his ears swiveling in confusion. "You are not angry. They ruined your work." "No," Jiwoo said firmly. She knelt down again, looking at the 3 cubs who were watching her anxiously. She pointed to herself, then to them, then to the helmet. She made a gesture that she hoped conveyed together and friends. Tavi understood first. Her tail began to move in slow, happy waves. "She liked it," Tavi told her father. "She wanted us to paint with her. We made art together." The other adult Veln were whispering among themselves, clearly uncertain how to handle this situation. In Veln culture, damaging someone's property, especially a warrior's equipment, was a serious offense. The fact that this human seemed pleased by it was baffling. Hwan-Ki studied Jiwoo's face carefully. He had been trained to read human expressions as part of his diplomatic preparation. He saw no deception there, no hidden anger, only genuine pleasure and warmth. "Among my people," Hwan-Ki said slowly, "art is sacred. It is how we communicate our deepest truths. When art is shared, when 2 artists work on the same piece, it is considered a bond, a connection of spirits." Jiwoo nodded. "Same for humans. When we create together, we become friends." She held out her paint-covered hand to Hwan-Ki, not for a handshake, but simply as a gesture of peace. He looked at it for a long moment, then at his daughter, who was watching him with hopeful eyes. Hwan-Ki reached out and dipped his own paw into the blue paint. Without breaking eye contact with Jiwoo, he pressed his paw print onto the helmet right next to his daughter's print, a parent's mark next to a child's mark, and both next to a human's mark. The other adults followed his example. Nyx's mother added a green print. Ren's father added an orange one. Soon the helmet had prints from 3 generations of Veln and 1 human marine. Other humans had started to gather, drawn by the unusual scene. Commander Jae-hyun pushed through the crowd, ready to intervene if necessary. He stopped short when he saw what was happening. "Marine Jiwoo, what is the meaning of—" He stopped mid-sentence when he saw the helmet, saw the prince, saw the Veln adults and their cubs standing with Jiwoo, all of them covered in paint, all of them making small chirping sounds of contentment. Jiwoo looked at her commander and shrugged. "First contact, sir. I think it's going well." The cubs had started to purr, a deep rumbling sound that vibrated through their small bodies. They pressed against Jiwoo's legs, smearing paint on her uniform pants, but she didn't care. She stroked their heads gently, the way she had petted cats back on Earth. Huan Qi watched this interaction with growing understanding. These humans were not just warriors or diplomats. They were people who understood play, who valued creation, who could see beauty in chaos. His people had feared humanity's military strength, their advanced technology, their aggressive expansion across the stars. But maybe, Huan Qi thought as he watched his daughter lean trustingly against the human's leg, they had been focusing on the wrong things. Maybe the important question wasn't whether humans were strong, but whether they were kind. The news of what happened with Jiwoo's helmet spread through both communities faster than anyone expected. By evening, every Veln in the nearby settlement knew about the human marine who let cubs paint on her warrior equipment. By the next morning, every human in the embassy knew about the alien children who had accidentally created the galaxy's strangest diplomatic breakthrough. Commander Jae-hyun had initially wanted to discipline Jiwoo for the incident. Military equipment was supposed to remain standard and professional, but Ambassador Hyunwoo overruled him immediately. The ambassador understood that what had happened on those stone steps was worth more than 1,000 formal negotiations. Jiwoo wore her painted helmet the next day during a ceremonial guard duty shift. She had sealed the paint with a clear protective coating to preserve it. As she stood at attention near the embassy entrance, Veln citizens passing by would stop and stare. Some pointed. Some whispered to their companions. A few approached cautiously to look more closely at the design. Word reached the Veln Council of Elders by midday. They called an emergency session to discuss this development. Some council members were offended that human military equipment had been treated like a child's toy. Others were intrigued that a human warrior would value children's art enough to wear it publicly. Elder Mira, the oldest member of the council, ended the debate with a simple observation. The human could have responded with anger. She responded with invitation instead. That tells us something important about their character. Meanwhile, Tavi, Nyx, and Ren had become celebrities among the young Veln. Other cubs asked them constantly about the human, about the painting, about whether it was scary to touch human things. Tavi proudly told everyone who would listen about how gentle Jiwoo had been, how she had smiled and invited them to continue painting. 3 days after the helmet incident, Huan Qi approached Ambassador Hyunwoo with a proposal. "Our people have a tradition," he explained. "When two families or clans want to build friendship, they share art. They create something together. Would your people be willing to participate in such a tradition?" Hyunwoo understood the significance immediately. This was an invitation into Veln culture, a recognition of humans as worthy partners. "We would be honored," he said. The first official art-sharing session was scheduled for the following week. The humans and Veln would meet in a neutral space, the gardens between the embassy and the settlement, and create art together. No formal agenda, no diplomatic protocols, just people being creative together. Jiwoo was asked to be one of the human representatives along with 5 others. One of them was Sung-ho, a quiet marine who had taught calligraphy back on Earth. Another was Bo-ra, a pilot who created digital paintings in her spare time. The others were chosen because they had shown interest in Veln culture. On the day of the art session, Jiwoo arrived at the gardens carrying her painting supplies. She had restocked her paints and brought extra brushes and canvases. She wore her painted helmet, of course. It had become her signature. The Veln arrived in small family groups. Tavi, Nyx, and Ren were there with their parents, bouncing with excitement. Other Veln brought their traditional art supplies. Natural dyes made from plants, brushes made from their own shed fur, and special paper made from tree bark. For the first few minutes, both groups were awkward. Humans and Veln stood on opposite sides of the garden space, unsure how to begin. Then Tavi broke away from her father and ran directly to Jiwoo, chirping a greeting. She presented Jiwoo with a piece of traditional Veln paper. "I brought this for you," Tavi said in careful English. Her father had been teaching her. "We can paint together again?" Jiwoo's face lit up. "Yes, absolutely, yes, that broke the ice. Soon humans and Veln were mixing freely, examining each other's supplies with curiosity, attempting to communicate through gestures and broken language. Sung-ho showed a group of young Veln how to hold a calligraphy brush. A Veln elder demonstrated the proper way to mix natural dyes for maximum color intensity. Bora had brought a tablet with a digital painting program. She showed it to a group of teenage Veln, who were amazed that you could paint with light. One of them, a young female named Isul, proved to be a natural at digital art. Within minutes, she was creating flowing designs that made Bora gasp with admiration. "How did you learn so fast?" Bora asked. Isul's translator collar converted her speech to English. "I just feel where the colors want to go. Don't you feel it too?" The art session was supposed to last 2 hours. It lasted 6. No one wanted to stop. Parents had to physically drag their cubs away, promising they could come back tomorrow. The humans had to be reminded multiple times that they had duties to return to. But the most significant moment came near the end of the session. Commander Jae-hyun, who had been watching from a distance, finally approached. He was a practical man, focused on security and protocol. He had never understood art, had always seen it as a waste of time that could be spent on more productive activities. He stood behind Jiwoo and Tavi, watching them work on a collaborative painting. Jiwoo was painting mountains in blue and white. Tavi was adding Veln prayer symbols in gold around the mountains, traditional marks meant to bless and protect. "Why do you paint?" Jae-hyun asked suddenly. Jiwoo looked up surprised. The commander rarely engaged in casual conversation. "It helps me feel connected, sir. To home, to people, to myself." Tavi added something in Veln. Her translator collar spoke for her. "Painting shows the inside. When you paint with someone, you share your inside with them. You become part of their spirit story." Jae-hyun was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "May I try?" Both Jiwoo and Tavi stared at him. Other humans nearby stopped what they were doing, equally shocked. Commander Jae-hyun did not paint. He did not engage in recreational activities. He worked, trained, ate, and slept. That was his routine. Jiwoo recovered first. She quickly set up a fresh canvas and offered him a brush and her paint selection. "What would you like to paint, sir?" Jae-hyun looked at the blank canvas for a long time. Then he dipped the brush in black paint and began to paint characters. Not pictures, but words. Korean words brushed in strong, confident strokes. When he finished, he had written, "We are stronger together than apart." An older Veln male approached and studied the characters. "What do they mean?" Jae-hyun explained. The Veln nodded thoughtfully, then picked up his own brush. Next to Jae-hyun's Korean characters, he painted Veln symbols that meant approximately the same thing. Many voices, one song. By the time the session finally ended, dozens of collaborative pieces had been created. Human and Veln families exchanged paintings as gifts. Children from both species were making plans to meet again. Adults were sharing contact information through their translators. Ambassador Hyunwoo stood with Hwan-ki, surveying the scene. "This is moving faster than I expected," Hyunwoo admitted. "I thought cultural exchange would take years." "Art is the fastest path to the heart," Hwan-ki said. "Faster than words, faster than treaties. When you create with someone, you cannot fear them anymore. You cannot see them as other. You see them as another artist, another person trying to express something true." "Your people are teaching us something important," Hyunwoo said. "Humans tend to focus on practical matters first. Alliances, trade agreements, security arrangements. We forget that understanding comes before agreement." Hwan-ki's tail moved in a gesture that meant agreement. "And your people are teaching us something too. You have such variety in your art, such willingness to experiment. Veln art has followed the same patterns for thousands of years. Your people show us that tradition and innovation can exist together." In the following weeks, the art sessions became a regular event. They happened twice a week, and attendance grew each time. More humans participated, including some who had never considered themselves artistic. More Veln families brought their children. Sung-ho started teaching formal calligraphy classes to interested Veln. 10 students signed up the first week. 20 the second week. By the fourth week, he had a waiting list. Bora's digital painting lessons were equally popular. She taught Veln teenagers how to use design software, how to layer images, how to create animations. Some of her students created works that she immediately sent back to Earth, knowing that human artists would be amazed by the unique Veln perspective. The cubs, Tavi, Nyx, and Ren, remained at the center of it all. They moved between human and Velen groups effortlessly, translating not just words but intentions and emotions. They taught humans about Velen art traditions and taught Velen about human techniques. Jiwoo's quarters became an unofficial cultural center. Velen and humans would gather there in the evenings to share meals, swap stories, and work on art projects. Jiwoo's walls were covered with collaborative pieces, each one representing a connection made between species. The transmission arrived during a routine evening meal. Ambassador Hyunwoo was eating with several Velen officials, discussing plans for a joint agricultural project, when his aide interrupted with an urgent message. "Sir, we've received a communication from the Kreth Empire. It's marked Priority 1. Hyunwoo excused himself and returned to his office. Hwang-ki followed him, sensing trouble. The Kreth were known throughout this region of space as aggressive expansionists. They had conquered 12 worlds in the past century, always through overwhelming military force. The message was brief and brutal in its directness. The Velen were to cease all contact with humanity within 10 days or face military consequences. The Kreth viewed the Human-Velen alliance as a threat to regional stability. They demanded that all humans leave Velkaris immediately and permanently. Hyunwoo read the message 3 times, his face growing harder with each reading.
How did they even know we were here?
They have scouts everywhere, Hwan-ki said, his ears flat against his head. They always watch developing worlds. They wait until we begin to gain strength or allies, then they strike. This is a standard intimidation tactic, Hyunwoo said, trying to remain analytical. They're testing whether the Velen will abandon new allies under pressure. It has worked before, Hwan-ki admitted quietly. Twice in our history we formed alliances with other species. Both times the Kreth threatened war. Both times our council chose survival over loyalty. Hyunwoo looked at his friend, because that's what Hwan-ki had become over these past weeks. A true friend. And this time? I don't know, Hwan-ki said. I hope we will stand strong. But hope and reality are often different things. An emergency meeting of the Velen Grand Council was called for the following morning. Ambassador Hyunwoo and Commander Jae-hyun were invited to attend as observers. They sat in the gallery watching as the council debated what to do. The chamber was a beautiful space, circular and open to the sky. 50 council members sat in concentric rings arranged by age and experience. The oldest members sat in the innermost ring, closest to the speaking platform. Elder Mira called the session to order. We face a choice, she said simply. Abandon our new friends and maintain peace with the Kreth, or stand with humanity and risk war. The debate that followed was intense. Many council members argued for capitulation. The Velen were not warriors. Their military was small and focused on defense, not capable of withstanding a Kreth invasion. Their people valued art, philosophy, and peaceful living. War would destroy everything they had built. We have survived for thousands of years by being practical, said Councillor Davin, a middle-aged male with dark fur. Survival requires pragmatism. The humans have only been here for weeks. The Kreth have been our neighbors for centuries. We must think long-term. Others argued differently. If we abandon the humans now, we teach the Kreth that threats always work, said Councillor Yuna, a younger female with bright eyes. We ensure that every future relationship will be dictated by Kreth approval. Is that the life we want? The debate went on for hours. Hyunwoo and Jae-hyun sat silently, knowing this decision had to be made by the Velen themselves. Whatever happened, they would respect it. Then something unexpected happened. The chamber doors opened and 3 small figures walked in. Tavi, Nyx, and Ren entered the Grand Council chamber, a space where cubs were absolutely forbidden. A shocked silence fell over the assembly. Elder Mira stood up. Children, you cannot be here. This is... Please, Tavi said, her small voice carrying in the silent chamber. Please let us speak. Just for a moment. Mira looked at the other elders. Several shook their heads, insisting on protocol, but others seemed curious. Finally, Mira nodded. Speak, little one, but be brief. Tavi walked to the center of the speaking platform. Nyx and Ren flanked her, their ears up, their tails high. Tavi carried something wrapped in cloth. She set it down and carefully unwrapped it. It was Jiwoo's helmet. This is what humans call a helmet, Tavi said, her voice growing stronger. It protects them in battle. It is very important to warriors. This helmet belongs to my friend Jiwoo. She turned the helmet slowly, showing the council all sides. The paw prints and handprints covered its surface, a chaotic rainbow of colors and marks. My brothers and I found Jiwoo painting this helmet, Tavi continued. We were curious. We came close. We accidentally put our paws in her paint and made marks on her helmet. We ruined her work. The council members leaned forward, listening intently. We thought she would be angry, Tavi said. In our experience, adults are always angry when children ruin their work. But Jiwoo did not get angry. She smiled at us. She put her own hand in the paint and added her mark next to ours. She invited us to continue. She made our accident into art. Tavi picked up the helmet and held it high. My father taught me that art is sacred to our people. That art shows the truth inside us. That when we create art together, we bond our spirits. She turned to look directly at Elder Mira. Jiwoo understood that. Without words, without training in our culture, she understood. She made us her spirit kin through art. Ren stepped forward. The humans could have come here with only weapons and demands. Instead, they brought paint. They brought music. They brought stories. They learn our art and teach us theirs. Nix added his voice. Are these the actions of enemies? Are these the actions of people who will betray us? Tavi set the helmet down gently. I am just a cub. I do not understand politics or war, but I understand kindness. I understand friendship. And I understand that if we abandon the humans because the Kreth tell us to, we teach everyone, including ourselves, that kindness means nothing, that friendship means nothing, that art and spirit bonds mean nothing. She looked around the chamber at all the adult faces watching her. I would rather be brave and kind than safe and afraid. Even if I am just a cub, I know that much is true. The three cubs left the chamber as silently as they had entered. The door closed behind them. For a long moment, no one spoke. Finally, Elder Mira stood again. The cubs have said what many of us were thinking but were afraid to voice. She looked around at her fellow council members. I call for a vote. All those in favor of standing with humanity, make the sign. Slowly, one by one, hands and paws rose across the chamber. Some council members hesitated, clearly torn. But in the end, the result was clear. 38 council members voted to stand with humanity. 12 voted for capitulation. Elder Mira made the formal declaration. The Veln people stand with our human friends. We will face the Kreth together. In the gallery, Yunwoo closed his eyes briefly. This was both the best and worst outcome. Best because it showed true friendship. Worst because now they would have to defend that friendship with force. Jae-hyun was already thinking tactically. How much time do we have? The Kreth will not attack immediately, Hwan-ki said. He had joined them after the vote. They will wait to see if we change our minds. They will send more warnings, more threats, perhaps a week, maybe two. Then we use that time, Jae-hyun said. We need to merge our military capabilities immediately. Your people know this terrain. We have superior weapons and tactical training. Together, we might have a chance. That evening, an emergency meeting was held in the embassy's main conference room. Human military officers sat with Veln warriors, spreading maps and tactical displays across every available surface. Bora worked with Veln navigators to identify defensive positions. Sung-ho coordinated with Veln scouts to map the Kreth's likely approach vectors. Jiwoo found Tavi, Nix, and Ren sitting outside the conference room, their ears drooping. They looked exhausted and scared. She sat down next to them without a word, and they immediately pressed against her sides, seeking comfort. Did we do the right thing? Tavi asked quietly. Father says there will be fighting now. People might die because we spoke. Jiwoo stroked Tavi's head gently. People might die, she agreed, not willing to lie. But they will die fighting for something good. Fighting for friendship. Fighting for the right to choose their own allies. That matters, Tavi. That matters more than anything. Will you fight? Ren asked. Yes, Jiwoo said. I will fight to protect you and your family and your world. Because that's what friends do. Inside the conference room, plans were being made. Outside, in the gardens where humans and Veln had painted together just days before, the last light of evening faded. Soon those gardens might become battlefields, but for now, they were still sacred spaces where two species had learned to see each other not as aliens but as people. And that, ultimately, was what they would be fighting for. The Kreth ships appeared in orbit exactly 8 days after their ultimatum. 12 war vessels, each one 3 times the size of the largest Veln ship. They hung in the sky like dark promises of violence, blocking out stars, casting shadows over Velkaris. Jiwoo stood on the embassy roof with her squad, checking their equipment one final time. She wore her painted helmet, of course. The paw prints and handprints seemed to glow in the pre-dawn light. Several other Marines had asked Veln friends to add marks to their own helmets. It had become a symbol, a reminder of what they were protecting. Commander Jae-hyun walked among the troops, his face set and serious. He had initially protested the decorated helmets, calling them unprofessional. But when he saw how they boosted morale, how they made both humans and Veln feel united, he had remained silent. Sometimes he was learning. Tradition mattered less than meaning. Sung-ho checked his rifle for the 10th time. Next to him stood Isol, the young Veln who had proven so talented at digital art. She was now his combat partner, assigned to use her superior night vision and hearing to complement his tactical training. They had practiced together for days, learning each other's strengths and signals. Bora was with the aerial units. She would be flying alongside Veln pilots, coordinating strikes against Kreth landing parties. The Veln flyers were incredible. They could navigate the planet's magnetic storms with ease, using senses that humans didn't possess. But they lacked the heavy weapons that human ships carried. Together, they would be formidable. The first Kreth message came at dawn. A holographic projection appeared above the capital city, showing a Kreth commander. The Kreth were reptilian with scaled skin and cold eyes. The commander spoke in standard galactic language, his voice amplified across the entire planet. Veln of Velkaris, this is your final opportunity. Expel the humans or we will remove them by force. You have 1 hour to comply. The hour passed in tense silence. Hwanki stood with the Council of Elders in the Capitol Plaza, visible to all. When the hour ended, he stepped forward and spoke clearly into a transmitter that broadcast his words to the Kreth fleet and every corner of Velkaris. We are Veln. We choose our own friends. We do not bow to threats. If you wish war, you will have it. The Kreth attack began immediately. Landing pods dropped from the warships like deadly rain, heading toward military installations and population centers. The sky lit up with weapons fire as human and Veln anti-aircraft systems engaged the pods. Some were destroyed in the air. Others made it to the ground. Jiwoo's squad was positioned in the crystalline forest outside the capital. These forests were unique to Velkaris, trees made of living crystal that grew slowly over centuries, creating natural defensive positions and mazes. The Veln knew every path, every hiding spot. They had grown up playing in these forests. The first Kreth soldiers emerged from their landing pods armed with heavy weapons and wearing thick armor. They moved in standard military formations, expecting organized resistance from fortified positions. What they got instead was chaos. Human and Veln teams struck from unexpected angles using the crystal formations as cover. Jiwoo fired from behind a massive crystal pillar while Tavi's father, a Veln warrior named Davin, circled around to attack from the rear. The Kreth turned to face him, only to be caught in crossfire from 2 more mixed teams. The Kreth were strong and well-armed, but they were fighting on unfamiliar terrain against an enemy they didn't understand. They expected the Veln to be easy targets, peaceful artists who would break at the first sign of violence. They expected humans to fight like humans, direct, organized, predictable. Instead, they faced something new. Humans who fought with Veln cunning, Veln who fought with human ferocity, a blended force that used the best qualities of both species. In the sky, Bora led a squadron of mixed fighters. Veln pilots flew through magnetic storms that scrambled Kreth sensors, leading enemy ships into traps. Human fighters would emerge from the storms with weapons blazing, catching the Kreth by surprise. The Kreth had superior numbers, but numbers meant less when you couldn't track your enemies. The battle lasted 3 days. 3 days of constant fighting, of teams rotating in and out of combat zones, of medical stations treating wounded from both species. 3 days of fear and exhaustion and determination. On the second day, a Kreth assault team broke through the defensive line near the settlement where Tavi's family lived. Civilians were evacuating, but the cubs were missing. Tavi, Nyx, and Ren had hidden in their favorite spot, a small cave in the crystal forest, not realizing the danger. Jiwoo heard about it over the comm system. Without hesitation, she broke from her assigned position and ran toward the settlement. Sung-ho and 2 Veln warriors followed her. They found the cubs just as a Kreth soldier discovered the cave entrance. The soldier raised his weapon, aiming at the small figures huddled inside. He saw them as enemy civilians, acceptable casualties in war. Jiwoo hit him from the side, tackling him before he could fire. They rolled across the crystal ground, grappling. The Kreath was stronger, his scaled hide resistant to her blows. He threw her off and raised his weapon again. Tavi emerged from the cave, placing herself between the soldier and her brothers. She spread her arms wide, making herself as big as possible, and hissed defiantly. It was a brave gesture from a small cub, facing a soldier who could kill her with one shot. The Kreath soldier hesitated. Just for a moment. Just long enough. Sung-Ho's shot took the soldier in the shoulder, spinning him around. Isil's follow-up shot finished the job. The Kreath fell, his weapon clattering on the crystal ground. Jiwoo scrambled to her feet and ran to the cubs, checking them frantically for injuries. They were terrified but unhurt. She gathered them close, shielding them with her body as more weapons fire echoed through the forest. "We need to move," Sung-Ho said urgently. "Now." They ran through the crystal forest, Jiwoo carrying Ren, Sung-Ho carrying Nyx, and Isil guiding Tavi. Behind them, they could hear more Kreath soldiers approaching. But they also heard something else. Reinforcements. A full platoon of human marines and Velen warriors converging on their position. The Kreath soldiers found themselves surrounded. They fought hard, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. None of them survived. By the third day, the Kreath were retreating. They had expected an easy victory. Instead, they had lost 4 of their 12 ships and hundreds of soldiers. The Velen-Human alliance had proven to be far more effective than anyone had anticipated. The final Kreath message was brief. "You have made your choice." The Kreath Empire will remember this. The warships withdrew, jumping to faster-than-light travel and disappearing from Velkaris' sky. A ragged cheer went up from the defenders, but it was muted. They had won, but at a cost. 37 humans had died. 82 Velen. Hundreds more were wounded. The victory celebrations were subdued. In the capital plaza, humans and Velen gathered not to celebrate but to mourn and to honor those who had fallen. The names of the dead were read aloud, each one marked with a moment of silence. Jiwoo stood with Tavi, Nyx, and Ren. The cubs were quiet, pressed against her legs. They had seen things no children should see, but they had also seen courage and sacrifice and friendship, tested under the worst conditions. Ambassador Hyunwoo and Hwan-Ki stood together, surveying the gathered crowd. Humans and Velen mixed freely now, without the awkwardness of those early days. They had fought together, bled together, saved each other's lives. That created bonds stronger than any treaty. "We need to make this permanent," Hyunwoo said quietly. "A formal alliance. Military cooperation. Cultural exchange programs, everything." "Agreed," Hwan-Ki said. "But first we remember what this was really about." He gestured toward Jiwoo and the cubs. "It started with paint and kindness. We must never forget that." In the weeks that followed, Velkaris began to rebuild. Damaged buildings were repaired. The wounded healed. Life slowly returned to normal, though it would never be quite the same normal as before. Jiwoo's helmet was placed in a museum, in a special exhibit about the alliance. The paw prints and handprints were preserved behind protective glass, accompanied by a plaque that told the story of how 3 curious cubs and 1 patient marine had started something that changed their worlds. But Jiwoo had already started painting a new helmet. She sat in her usual spot on the stone steps outside her quarters, her paint kit open, her brushes ready. She was painting mountains again, and flowers when she heard familiar chirping sounds. Tavi, Nyx, and Ren approached, their paws already covered in paint. They had learned to prepare ahead of time now. "May we?" Tavi asked politely. Jiwoo smiled and gestured to the helmet and paints. "Always." The cubs sat down beside her and began adding their prints to the new helmet. Blue paws, yellow paws, green paws, each one a mark of friendship, each one a promise. Other humans and Velen began to gather. Sung-Ho brought calligraphy brushes. Bora brought her tablet. Isil brought traditional Velen dyes. Soon the stone steps were crowded with people from both species, all of them creating, all of them sharing, all of them building something together. Commander Jae-hyun watched from a distance. He had a fresh canvas under his arm and a small set of brushes in his hand. He had discovered, much to his surprise, that he enjoyed painting. It helped him process the things he had seen during the battle.